or updates the previous mode. The ecosystem created by Apple is made to force users to use only their products. Lawsuits and legal challenges have been filed against these practices. Apple has created a ton of accessories that work perfectly with the iPhone, but all of them are very expensive. Most of them aren't needed, but it is undoubtedly wanted. These accessories, like AirPods and Apple Watch, will not work perfectly with other non-Apple devices. Apple has promised exclusively the best performance and compatibility with its own name brand accessories. Customers are distrusting Apple because of its practices around battery management and forced upgrades. In recent years, the company has made it harder to repair devices independently. Customers are forced to use official services, which are often more expensive due to Apple's custom parts and repair restrictions. Customer service has declined, with the focus shifting to replacement rather than repair. Apple Care Plus is discussed as a costly insurance option. Since Steve Jobs' death, Apple's strategy has shifted to maximizing profits from loyal customers. People think Apple is trying to maximize profits by postponing big improvements on purpose. Brand loyalty, not product specs, is said to be the reason for Apple's success. iPhone 16 is a shameless cash grab. A typical Apple strategy is to mimic its competitors rather than beat them. Today, the iPhone is still one of the best-selling smartphones in the world, but the landscape is changing.
Apple's quarterly revenue was held back by falling sales of its iPhones and weakness in China.
Consumers are demanding more than just another yearly upgrade. They want innovation. So what do you think? Has Apple lost its magic with the iPhone? Or are they just one innovation away from blowing our minds again?
Ever may, ever may, ever may.
¡Puede de una vez ser inmundo! ¡No tenías ninguna opción! ¡Muere de una vez, ser inmundo!
Sending money home with Remitly is easy. So when you're watching basketball and you remember it's almost your sister's birthday, you can quickly send money to her bank account and get right back to...
The Dynamic Island is such a low-key, useful feature to have on the iPhone that I never quite appreciated enough until I picked up my iPhone again after using an Android phone for the last few months. So in this video, I want to share with you the top 14 ways to use the Dynamic Island in actual real-world use, as well as a couple of quick tips on how to actually use and interact with the Dynamic Island. Because not many people realize, for example, that if you don't want to see something in the Dynamic Island, you can just swipe across and dismiss it. Now, I actually did this once by mistake and thought I'd dismissed something that I actually wanted to keep, and then realized again you can just simply swipe back to bring it back again. So you can have up to 2 apps running in the Dynamic Island at once. Say you've got music and a countdown timer, but I have noticed that if you have 2 timers, for example, you can't display them both at once. And if you have more than 2 apps open at any one time that works with the Dynamic Island, it can get pretty difficult to control which ones actually display in there. It's meant to be the most recent 2 apps, but I found on a lot of occasions that just doesn't work. And some super basic controls here, but you tap once on the Dynamic Island and that will open up the app in full screen view, but a tap and hold will give you a small pop-up window, usually with some shortcut controls, so you don't need to go into the full app. So I'm going to run through some of my favorite apps and use cases for the Dynamic Island, and hopefully you'll see at least 1, maybe 2 that you didn't already know that you'll find useful. The first one is an obvious one: play music or podcasts from any music app, Apple Music, Spotify, podcasts, and it will show up in the top here. Now you can tap and hold to get to the quick controls to play, pause, resume, skip, and of course tap once to open the full app. Now I'm not actually going to say that again because it's the same for every app here. Tap once, the full thing opens. No need to repeat myself each time here. Now the next thing, and genuinely useful thing that I found, is another music one, but it's when wearing headphones, and you can briefly see the headphones connect and the battery level up there in the Dynamic Island. Now this is so useful as someone who has a pair of in-ear headphones, specifically for the gym each day. It's really useful to know when they're running low, so I can remember to throw the case on charge when I get back in the car or at home. Now it does also show up when your headphones reach a low battery level, but I find that the notification disappears pretty quickly, that I often miss it. Your phone's typically in your pocket already when you hear that notification. But when I don't miss it, it is when I'm putting in my headphones, because you're probably on your phone already choosing what you want to listen to for that gym session. So that little graphic right there, super useful. Also, speaking of music, another handy one is when I open Spotify whilst sat next to an AirPlay speaker, like a HomePod, and the Dynamic Island pops up asking if I want to AirPlay to something nearby. Again, one tap and I can play on a nearby speaker. Super, super easy. Now next is one that I think is quite underrated, and that is Uber. And I believe this also works for Lyft as well. Now it will show the time until your ride picks you up. Again, super useful because, if you're waiting in line for an Uber, then you're probably sat there waiting, probably playing on your phone already, messaging people, or whatever you're doing. So it is really nice not to have to keep going in and out of the Uber app just to check how far your ride away is. And then when you are in the Uber, it shows you the time that you'll arrive, and if you again tap and hold, you get more of a progress indicator that also shows you where you are in your journey. Just excuse the poorly filmed footage here. This was shot at midnight, as you can probably see, after a very long day of flight delays, but you get the idea here. Oh, and also similarly with food delivery apps, which will show you how long until your food gets here. Also super useful. But speaking of flight delays, now a number of airlines like United support the Dynamic Island in their own apps, but there are also third-party flight apps, which are again super useful. So on said day of those flight delays, I was using an app called Flighty to keep an eye on what was going on, and I found that I was getting updates to my phone way before they were showing on the boards on the airports. Now this one is a paid subscription, it's like £50 a year or so, but if you fly a lot, this is well worth the cost. Now you can get updates to your flights, gate information, delays, even predicted delays from your flight, and it also shows you your seat number in the Dynamic Island. Really, really useful again. All again within that little Dynamic Island, which again, if you're sat in an airport waiting, super useful without needing to constantly go into your airline's app and refresh to see if you missed something, or having to constantly get up and keep checking the boards every 20 minutes or so. And so even though this is £50 a year or so, as someone who just spent £400, I think it was, on rebooking flights and another Uber after my flights were delayed, then cancelled, then rebooked, all sorts of horrendous stuff, I think it is well worth it to give you the best chance at getting ahead of what's going on in your flight. So like I said before, the more you travel, the more it's worth using some form of app that can keep you updated on what's going on. Now, of course, you're probably already aware that countdown timers show up in the dynamic island as well. So you just start a timer, swipe up for it to go up to the top, and you can then pause, cancel it if you tap and hold on it. But another great way that I've used Dynamic Island has been when paying to park my car, and then being able to keep an eye on how long I have left. And it's not like you keep getting out your phone to check how long you had left on your car, but when you are naturally checking your phone for notifications or messages or emails, being able to at a glance remind yourself that you only have 15 minutes left or what have you is a very, very handy dandy reminder, because a few times I have totally lost track of time and not realised, and then being stung with a parking ticket. So yeah, that one is very, very cool. Now, there's also a number of sports apps like the NFL app where you can pin games to the dynamic island to see, before it starts, what time the game does start, and then keep track of the scores if you can't watch the live game. There's gym workout apps like Heavy, which I've been using for the last 3 or 4 years now or so, where it will count down your rest timer between sets using the dynamic island, and then again a tap and hold will show you what the next exercise is. You've also got the new flashlight or torch, depending on which country you live in, and tapping on this will expand to give you more control. So swiping up and down will change the brightness, and swiping left to right will change how thin or how wide that light is, just in case you want a really bright but also really focused beam of light instead of just a general wash of lights. Now, I use this almost every day when I walk upstairs to bed at like midnight, trying not to wake anyone else in the house with these bright torch lights that it did previously. Navigation also goes up into the dynamic island for both Apple and Google Maps. Very, very impressive. As soon as you swipe up out of either of these apps, they will go into the dynamic island so you can see the next turn you need to take. And again, if you tap and hold, you'll get just a little bit more information on those directions and the street names and those kind of things. Now, if you ever screen record on your iPhone, Dynamic Island puts this little red dot up into the top. So again, you can quickly get to and stop the screen recording. Just love how quick and easy it is to do that. But outside of these, there are, of course, plenty of other apps. You've got Pixel Pals that puts like a Tamagotchi-like animal in the dynamic island to feed and play with. You've got Hit the Island, lets you use the dynamic island to play a fun game. And apps that turn the dynamic island into a quick shortcuts area. There's quick access to your notes or to see your clipboard history. Maybe let me know down below in the comments what your favourite dynamic island apps or use cases are. I hope that gave you some new ideas on how to use a dynamic island. Subscribe to the channel for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, bye.
Switch to our most affordable unlimited phone plan and get 2 lines for just $80 per month with Simply Unlimited from Google Fi Wireless. Stay connected with all the essentials, like unlimited data, calls, and texts, plus 5 gigabytes of high-speed hotspot tethering per month for each line, and full connectivity for select smartwatches.
Today, I'm going to share with you how I was able to unlock the film look with the iPhone 16 Pro. And I rented the Fuji X-T5 to help me out a little bit. Use this method for achieving the film look with the iPhone 16 Pro or the Pro Max, and the iPhone 15 Pro and the Pro Max. If you don't have either of these cameras, I uploaded some raw files that you can download and play around with as you follow along. Normally, I like to try to go out and get these filmic looking type shots for client work and YouTube videos using the log profiles with my bigger sensor cameras like the Sony a7S III, which I'm filming this on right now, or the a7 III. But I wanted to be able to achieve that film look with the camera that I'll pretty much take with me everywhere. Straight out of the camera, the iPhone's footage can sometimes feel a bit too sharp and digital. To get that more organic and filmic vibe I was after, I tweaked a few settings, I adjusted my shooting style, and I used the X-T5's color science as a reference. And then I created 5 LUTs inspired by classic Fuji film simulations. I'm not the original thinker of this idea. Arthur R. told me about it, so all the credit goes to him for the Fuji film LUT idea. Go check out his channel. I'll show you how to achieve the film look in 4 parts. We're going to start with settings, then I'll talk to you about some shooting techniques. We'll go over lighting and exposure, and then color grading to add that extra flavor to your shots. And then if you stick around to the end, I'll talk to you about the Final Cut camera app and also using the Blackmagic camera app, which is really nice because then you can preview the LUTs in the camera as you're shooting. Alright, we have quite a bit of info to pack into the shortest as possible YouTube video, and that's what we will be tackling today on the Film Alliance. So the first thing that we're going to do is jump into our settings, and we are going to go over to camera. We're going to go to the top one, which is record video, and I'm going to switch my record video to 4K 24 frames per second. 4K is the resolution and 24 is the frames per second. 4K 24 will create a subtle motion blur that mimics how our eyes perceive movement in real life, making it feel more natural and immersive. This frame rate also has a very distinct visual rhythm that evokes that classic film look. I think it's one of the most important steps in getting your phone to look like it was shot on film. So after that, we're going to scroll on down until we get to HDR video. Make sure that one is turned off. Then we're going to keep on going down, and I'm going to lock my camera in place. And this is in case I want to get a zoom shot. You don't want the camera to jump between the cameras and have a jolting effect while you're zooming in. I'm going to talk more about the cameras and which ones I like to use and how I recommend only using one of them. But if you do like to use all 3 different cameras to get wide shots and then maybe a telephoto shot, I would recommend locking off your camera so that it doesn't jump between them while you're recording in your video. And then finally, in the same setting, we're going to head down and we're going to lock our white balance. Locking your white balance ensures consistent colors throughout your entire video. Even if the lighting conditions change a little bit, your white balance still needs to be the same. This is a super important step to make sure that your clips match up in post-production. If your white balance is not locked in place and your white balance is fluctuating all over the place, it's going to be very difficult to have your clips match up and have continuity and consistency between your colors when you get to post-production. And let's be honest, if you're shooting different colors and scenes and you're trying to mix and match all those clips together, it's not going to have that much of a film. Now we're going to jump out of record video and go back to the main settings, and we're going to head on down till we get to formats. The first option we see here is camera capture, high efficiency, and most compatible. I switched this over to most compatible. High efficiency is like a smart way to store your stuff on your phone. It squeezes all of your photos and videos down, takes up less space on your phone, but the shots still look pretty good. The downside is that every device or program out there can't open these files directly, and that's why I choose most compatible. That's like the old, reliable way. It saves your photos and your videos in a format that pretty much any computer or phone can open up right away. The catch is that the files are going to be a little bit bigger and they're going to fill up your storage faster, but it's going to be way less complicated once you go to edit your footage. Then in the same exact menu, go all the way down to the very bottom where we see Apple ProRes. Go ahead and toggle that on, and then go to ProRes encoding and switch that to log. You've heard of me talking about log up until this point. If you don't know what that is, Apple Log is like shooting video in RAW mode. It doesn't look great right away, it looks washed out and flat, but it does preserve way more colors and light information, which will give you and I more flexibility when we get to post-production to edit our footage to make it look film-like. It's also great for getting the best image quality when we find ourselves in tricky lighting situations. You don't have to use log for your shots, but just understand if you shoot straight out of camera, you're not going to get the type of filmic look that you've been seeing in my shots that I've been showing you up until now. And you're going to have to rely more heavily on the shooting techniques that you use, the lighting, and the exposure. A lot of the way that I got the film look is from shooting in Apple Log and then just adding my LUTs in post-production. By the way, you don't have to use my LUTs to get that film look on your iPhone. You can use other people's LUTs out there who have created cinematic looking LUTs or film-like LUTs for your iPhones. I'm just telling you how I did it and how I was able to achieve these shots. You could also manually color grade all of your log footage. That's just going to be more time consuming and it will add to your workflow. And by the way, I do switch between log. I'm just telling you how I did it and how I was able to achieve these shots. You could also manually color grade all of your log footage. That's just going to be, I'm just telling you how I did it and how to get that film look on your iPhone. You can use other people's LUTs out there who have created cinematic looking LUTs or film-like LUTs for your iPhones. I'm just telling you how I did it and how I was able to achieve these shots. You could also manually color grade all of your log footage. That's just going to be more time consuming and it will add to your workflow. And by the way, I do switch between log and normal color profile while I'm out shooting. I'll get more into that once we get into lighting and exposure. So let's jump out of there and get back into our main camera settings. And we're going to go to the next one down, which is preserve settings. And the first thing that we see is camera mode at the top, and we're going to toggle that. This way, between our video shots, shots, we happen to close up our phone, put it in our pocket or something, then pull it back out again to get some more shots, we don't have to toggle to get back to the video mode. Then we're going to continue to scroll down until we get to exposure adjustment. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. This way we'll always see a little exposure adjustment tab right up here, and you can easily toggle your exposure compensation left and right. We're going to get more into this once we get into the exposure and lighting portion. And then finally we're going to go down a little bit more until we get to Apple ProRes. We're going to turn that on. That way we don't have to continuously jump back and forth between Apple ProRes on and off when we go to close up our phone, because that's just one more step every single time you open up your video. Now let's jump back out into the main camera settings, and we're going to scroll on down until we get to composition. Go ahead and turn your grid and your level on. Then go down a couple more until we get to the main camera. Right now it's set up as our main camera, the 24mm lens, and then we also have two other options, 28 and 35. I'm going to go ahead and toggle those two off. When I was out in the field shooting, I realized that I only want to use one of these cameras to get that film quick, if possible. This way all of my shots will have consistency and continuity, not only in the way that they look as far as colors go, but also with the distortion on the outsides of the frame. If I was shooting a super wide shot and then switching it over to telephoto and then back to the 24, it might be pretty jarring to the viewer, so I try to keep it right at 24mm the entire time. Also, I noticed when I switch between the different cameras, the 28 and 35mm, they seem to have a lot more noise in the shadows than the 24mm. So I'm going to try to stick to 24 because I want that highest image quality possible. I'll still be able to jump into the wide shot using only this camera, but I'm going to try to stick with only one focal length during the entire sequence. Shooting techniques are important when you want to get that film. It comes down to what you're trying to shoot. If you were just doing some B-roll for some client work or a YouTube video like this, then you're going to want to pick one of these LUTs and just stick with it the entire time. And whether it's my LUT or someone else's LUT, stick with the same LUT throughout the entire sequence. Another thing that I found is when I'm shooting in low light situations, or even when the sun is not too high in the sky, it's kind of lower in the sky, I'm getting a lot of ghost flares. The ghost flare on the iPhone 16 Pro refers to that unwanted visual artifact that can appear in your photos or videos, especially when shooting towards bright light sources. It manifests as a little light reflection bouncing around the inside of the lens elements and the camera sensor, and it can cause these reflections, which are super distracting, especially if you're hand holding the camera. You can change the camera angle by slightly repositioning yourself in the way that you're holding it, and this will eliminate or minimize the ghost flares. But another thing to keep in mind is try to keep your lenses clean, because if you have a little smudge on your lens, it's going to make these ghost flares even worse. That's why I keep one of these on me, no matter what camera I'm shooting with, just to make sure my lenses are always clean. I use the grid to frame up my shots and to make sure my composition is looking decent. But even a bigger piece of advice that I can give to you is making sure that your horizon is level. And that's why we turned on the level in the settings, because it's so important. Too many times I've gotten home and my level was off a little bit, so I had to scale in and then rotate. And when you scale in to rotate to get the level right, you're losing out on resolution. And we're already dealing with a small sensor out of the iPhone, so we want to get as much resolution as possible. So make sure your horizons are level. And finally, because we're dealing with a smaller sensor and a fixed aperture, the shutter speed is going to shoot way up, especially when we're in bright environments. It's for this reason that I say with the iPhone, don't try to move too much unless you have a gimbal. We don't always have to be moving with our cameras. And the deeper I go down this filmmaking journey, I'm realizing the subject to do the work. Just sit there, have a good frame, and composition, and just focus on the storyline rather than trying to move the camera too much. Another big thing, especially when it comes to the iPhone 16 Pro, is the native sound that you get out of the mics is unbelievable. A big part of creating cinematic film look type of shot with your iPhone is getting good sound implementation into your B-roll and adding it as sound effects. This will elevate the immersive experience. So after I'm done going around getting my filmic shots, I'll jump into the iPhone sound recorder and I'll go try to get natural sound effects so I don't have to pull it from another site. When it comes to getting that film look, I always tell my students in all the courses that I've created, the best time to shoot is when the sun is lower in the sky, whether that's golden hour or blue hour, not when the sun is high in the sky and you're going to get a lot of harsh lighting. Also, don't shoot into the sun or other lighting sources that are super bright because it's going to wash out all of your colors. The only time that I'll have the sun in the actual shot is when the sun is lower in the sky and it's not going to blow out my colors. And that brings up how I shoot with the 16 Pro when I'm only using the native settings, not using any external apps. And that is by turning my exposure compensation to negative 0.7. This way the iPhone is not digitally trying to bring up those shadows and then giving me a muddy image. So I set my exposure compensation to negative 0.7 while I'm shooting in Apple log, and then I'll use my finger to lock on the highlights, whatever the brightest part of the frame is, and then I just hold it there. Because we're shooting in Apple log, I can bring up those shadows in post-production if I need to, and I much prefer to bring up the shadows than try to bring down the highlights. And this is the workflow that I use to properly implement my LUTs into that footage. Another thing that I like to do is also switch my camera over to the standard color profile or the standard camera, which is not Apple log, and then take a reference video to see what that looks like. So when I get to post-production, if I'm seeing my colors not matching up like I think they should in real life, I can look at how the iPhone computed those colors so that I can have a good apples to apples comparison. And now let's talk about color grading. I happen to use Final Cut Pro, but if you have Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, these methods will work as well. You're going to want to make sure that your library is set to an SDR timeline. This way, when you go to export your Apple logged footage, which is Rec 2020, it'll export as a Rec 709 clip or a standard dynamic range clip. Some people like to use the color space override inside Final Cut Pro to get their clips to be that Rec 709 inside the timeline. But that will mess with the LUTs that I created and the way that I applied these colors. I like to do it this way because then I can actually monitor or preview my LUTs in the Blackmagic Camera app rather than converting it over to Rec 709. And then when I go over to the Blackmagic Camera app and I'm shooting in Apple log, I won't be able to preview what it actually looks like. I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get into the Blackmagic Camera app. So I go ahead and drag my Apple log footage over into Final Cut Pro. And as you can see, it automatically looks good. That's because Final Cut Pro automatically adds an Apple log transform line. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off. We're going to turn that off by coming up to the little eye up here on the right hand side. Then we're going to come down where it says basic. We're going to click on that and we are going to go to general. That opens up more options and you can see that we are shooting in the Rec 2020 color space. We're going to go ahead and turn that camera LUT to none. Now we're back to that Apple log grayed out look. Then I'm going to go over to my effects panel, go over to color, and I'm going to drag over a custom LUT to that log shot. Once my custom LUT is in there, I'll come up here to this little film tab, and you'll see I have a custom LUT which is outlined by a yellow bar. Now it's time to import the LUT. Whether you got my LUT or you bought somebody else's LUT, you're going to come over here, the drop down menu where it says none, and you're going to go choose custom LUT. Now go find the LUT wherever you downloaded it to. You can click on that and then press open. Once we have the LUTs imported, now we can hit the drop down bar again and you can choose which one of the LUTs you want to drag onto your shot. As you can see right now, I have a Fuji shot with the film simulation Eterna. Right next to it, I have my Eterna LUT that I put onto this Apple log footage and it looks pretty close. But let's say I want to adjust it further. Maybe I don't like the color of it. Maybe my white balance was off in camera. Maybe I didn't expose something correctly. So I'm going to go back into the effects and I'm going to drag over color wheels onto my clip. Now I'm going to drag the color wheels above the custom LUT and then start editing the color wheels from there. After I'm done tweaking this clip to how I want it, I'm going to go ahead and click on the clip. I'm going to press Command-C, which is copy. And then I'll highlight all the rest of the clips in the entire timeline. And then I'm going to press Command-Shift-V, which is going to paste all of my attributes to every single clip, so they all match up. Then I would probably just go from start to finish and adjust each clip using the comparison window in order to make sure that all of my clips match up back to back. The LUT just gives us a baseline of somewhere where to start. Then the rest we have to make our own adjustments along the way. If you're trying to do this without LUTs, then I would say just use the comparison window, whether you're in DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro, and then take a screenshot of whatever the clip is that you want to try to match up from a movie or an image that you like the look of. Drag it into your timeline, and then have the comparison shot side by side, and then start using the color wheels to try to get your clip to match up to that image. And then if you don't want to use any of those steps, you can use the curves or the color wheels to try to get this clip to look like you want it. But that is starting from scratch. It's how we built the LUTs. It's going to take a little bit of time, but you will get the hang of it eventually. Now Now let's talk about the Final Cut camera app. In order to get your shots to look better than just using the native settings that are within the iPhone, I found that the Final Cut camera app is extremely helpful. If you'd like more exposure control than just using the exposure compensation meter, then download the Final Cut camera app. It lets you adjust settings like shutter speed, ISO, balance, and focus, so you don't have to just rely on the autofocus within the camera itself. If you're into multicam shooting, then it's particularly useful because it can sync footage from up to 4 iPhones, I think, and then you can seamlessly edit it in Final Cut Pro. Think of it as like the bridge between your iPhone's built-in camera and the powerful editing tools that are within Final Cut Pro, which gives you the tools to capture and create cinematic videos right from your phone. There are some things that you're going to want to make sure you have it switched on if you want to use the same methods and the LUTs that I created for the phone. And that's going out to this little circular bar that houses all of the settings. We're going to switch from HVC to Apple ProRes. Then we're going to switch SDR to log. And 4K 24 is exactly how we shoot. We're going to stay locked on our 24mm lens. And then you press on this little arrow at the bottom right. And that will give you access to autofocus, manual focus, along with your white balance.
Uy, qué bizarro, boludo. Qué bizarro, chabón.
Los Black Friday deals de Walmart
Nah,
están
nah,
aquí
qué
y es tiempo de
experiencia
comprar.
que tuve.
Llévate este Hisense CD de 50
Disparar eso en modo Horizon,
el
boludo.
Richard Price Toddler Bolt Toy por
Bizarro.
solo $5 y muchos más deals que
Estuvo
quieres.
bizarro.
Compra los Black Friday deals de Walmart desde ahora hasta el 17.
Ah. Estuvo bizarro, man.
Like a relentless weed, moderate to severe ulcerative colitis symptoms can keep coming back. Start to break away from UC with Tremfya, with rapid relief at 4 weeks. Tremfya blocks a key source of inflammation. At 1 year, many people
Now, the Blackmagic camera app, on the other hand, is great because it will allow you to record in H.265 in the Apple log. Whereas with the Final Cut camera app, you can't shoot in H.265 while still shooting in log. H.265 is great because that's smaller file sizes. This will help with file sizes on your phone because smaller file sizes means you won't run out of space as fast. Apple log doesn't have a specific video compression standard like H.264 or H.265. Instead, it captures footage in a flat color profile designed for post-production flexibility, primarily using it
Que eso parece un zombie así medio nada, culiao.
quality compression. But ProRes will produce larger file sizes compared to H.264 and H.265. ProRes is a higher quality codec designed for professionals.
Ay, la concha de tu madre.
H.265 is more compressed, it reduces the file size for easier storage, and it still looks great in my opinion. Also, I mentioned with the Blackmagic camera app, you have the ability to preview the LUTs on the display so you can see what the actual shot looks like. And you even have the ability to burn those LUTs into your shot. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you're in a pinch, but you do have the ability to do that. That's why I highly recommend, if you want to get the most out of your camera, download the Blackmagic camera app. While mirrorless cameras offer superior image quality and manual control, the convenience, portability, and versatility of an iPhone make it a compelling choice for everyday use and spontaneous shooting. Achieving a film look with your iPhone 16 Pro or your iPhone 15 Pro Pro Max is entirely possible with the right techniques and tools. Whether you're shooting with the native settings, the Final Cut Pro camera app, or the Blackmagic camera app, or another app, capturing cinematic footage is within your reach. Remember to consider factors like shooting style, lighting, and the exposure to elevate your visuals. If you don't want to use my LUTs, go out and test different LUTs while you're shooting with Apple LUT. This way, all of your shots will have continuity and consistency. While dedicated cameras offer advantages, the iPhone's convenience and portability make it a powerful creative tool. Embrace its potential and experiment to unlock your filmmaking capabilities. I'm Joe with the Film Alliance. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, have a good week.
No, boludo, está me hace mal, boludo. Me hace mal. No, que tiene mucha nicotina, no sé, man.
Let me paint you a picture. One that isn't this Among Us guy in a Mario Galaxy situation. That's not that picture. Let me paint you a different picture. Someone pays $85 for a birthday cake, and the cake comes out looking like this. Honestly, this cake looks like that one Snapchat account that I reviewed in an older video where they just put like rainbow sprinkles and eggs in a waffle maker machine and was like, wow, this came out so amazing. That's what that cake looks like to me. Would you pay $85 for this? No. I'm sure all of us have been in a relatable situation where you pay for something and you get something that looks, or you get something that you didn't ask for. I absolutely hate lettuce, and when I ordered Chipotle online for delivery, they gave me lettuce instead of cheese, and I was pretty upset about it. I was like really hungry and I was really looking forward to it, and when they put like lettuce that gets into the leaves of everything, you have to pull them out like one by one. You can't just like wipe it off. I was kind of upset. I did nothing about it. Now here you're at a crossroads and you have a choice. What are you going to do here? Do you, be upset, leave a bad review maybe for this business? Or you don't even have to do that. Do you maybe just contact the person who made the cake and was like, hey, I don't really like this. Or you could do all that to try to reconcile the situation offline. But then the cake maker bashes you online and complains about you being a terrible customer.
Today I had one of the worst client experiences I've ever had since opening the storefront. She then got super defensive and very rude about the price of the cake. She even bashed us and put us on her Facebook page.
Then you have to come out on TikTok to prove your innocence. And now you tried to be polite about it, but they wanted to complain about you on TikTok, and now everything is public, and now everything's on TikTok to millions of people who have nothing to do with the situation about a goddamn cake. What about that option? Because that seems like the new norm these days. Now, I'm not saying that this person doesn't deserve to have their shit blasted on TikTok. Sometimes you could justify that it's deserved. Sometimes we all collectively gather around the internet campfire and make fun of someone. And that's like fun. It's fun to be a little drama frog and sit there and be like, wow, that's silly. That's kind of goofy. But you know what isn't?
Oh, qué culiado, mira, todos estaban.
Today's video, Aura.
Bueno, se pone imposible, yo la concha de puta.
Appreciate their work. Aura is one of the ways that you can prevent being bullied and doxxed online because they remove all of your personal information from over 40 data brokers, junk mail, telemarketing websites, and they monitor all of your personal information to make sure no one steals your identity or uses it to open a loan. Just the other day, I was doing some personal stuff and Aura notified me that my information was used to like check my credit score and things like that. And at first I was like, oh my god, what happened? Who's using my information? And then I was like, wait, it was me. But it would be nice if I knew immediately within seconds that someone was trying